All right, so our next panel, one I've really been looking forward to since we started building the schedule here at Voice, is that, you know, not everybody has a voice. And we talk about accessibility, we talk about inclusion, we talk about diversity. And as we build technology, when we started off this event, I started it off because I wanted to make sure the thing we all remembered is that we all are human. We all have a unique set of needs and requirements. And the most important thing is we have to move technology forward together. Well, this next panel is really about that, so I'd like to bring them up. And I'm going to introduce our moderator, David Heafitz. Come on up, David, please. Another panelist, please come up, and I guess we're going to get you situated here momentarily. So David Heafitz is the Vice President in GBTS. David, will you give me the acronym there?
All right, so Global Business and Technology Solutions.
Okay, Global Business and Technology Solutions. I guess I could have practiced that before I came up here, you'd think. Anyway, David is going to introduce the panel. Thank you so much, David. Let's give it up.
Thanks so much. I'm mic'd here, so.
He's mic'd.
Hey, listen, this is supposed to be an intimate fireside chat. So for the first time in the history of this arena, we're going to offer an unprecedented offer, and that is for everyone in the cheap seats, you've now been upgraded. So please come forward. If you're in the back, we'd really like to make this a conversation. So if you're upstairs, come on down. If you guys in the tables in the back can come forward, we really appreciate it. We want this to be an interactive panel. So as introduced, I'm David Heafitz, part of Global Business and Technology Solutions within Prudential. I've been with the firm for 17 years, and I think that's probably longer than some people in this conference have been alive. So, but I look at that number, and sometimes I was like 17 years. But one of the reasons I stay with Prudential, and I'm so proud to be an employee of Prudential, is because it's a company that dedicates itself to a mission. Yesterday, you heard about our business mission on wellness, financial wellness, and the importance of serving our communities. I'm talking about the mission that Prudential delivers to its employees, that we believe in diversity and inclusion, and I hope that you'll see today that we actually put our money where our mouth is, and that's why I'm excited to work in Prudential, that we stand behind bringing in a diverse pool of talent and supporting them in everything they do so we can be an example for other companies and elsewhere in society. So before we get the panel going and I introduce the panelists, I'd just like to sample the audience. How many of you know somebody who is deaf? You guys don't count because your panelists are front. How many of you have worked with someone who is deaf? How many of you work in technology or for a technology company? The Voice Conference, I thought we'd be more hands. And how many of you have worked on voice technologies for the deaf? So last question we can see, there are no hands up in the audience. I hope when we finish this panel, there'll be a call to action that we can look at how voice technologies can enable those without a voice to be able to participate seamlessly in our workplace. So let me introduce our panelists. I want to start by saying, before I introduce Kevin and Thomas, are the second and third deaf employees in our Newark facility. We have thousands of people worked here. We've been in Newark for over 120 years. And Thomas and Kevin, it's actually Kevin is the second and Thomas is the third deaf employee. We did not hire them because they are deaf. They weren't on part of a special program to hire deaf people. We don't have quotas for those who are differently abled. Kevin is an investment associate in our PGIM business. PGIM is one of the largest asset managers in the world. Kevin's been with us for just over a year. He applied on the job through the internet from Gallaudet University. So he applied, he went through the interview process like anybody else who might be applying to one of the hundreds of positions we usually have open at Prudential. Thomas joined us through one of our primary pipeline programs, our intern program. Thomas was an intern with us last summer. He works in our enterprise information management team, which is a team that deals with data management and visualizations for our business partners. Thomas joined us when he graduated from Rochester Institute of Technology in February. Thomas and I get along because despite being deaf, Thomas is as loud and obnoxious as a Red Sox fan as I am. But besides Thomas and Kevin, Diane Hettinger runs the enablement team within our health and wellness division. Diane actually is employed to make sure that employees have opportunities to be connected to the workplace and does work on those tools. So I'm sure Diane was hired for her skills in that space, other than Kevin and Thomas. Diane's been with us for about 12 years, and that's after 22 years of AT&T where she did similar programs. So we only have a half hour, so I want to get right into it. I want to, why don't we take a seat, and we'll jump in. If you have questions, feel free to bring them up as we go through. But as we get into it, I just want to show you guys something that's very exciting. Amazon heard that we were doing this panel, and fresh off the presses, it's good to see that Alexa is now offering 2 services, one to read sign language, and one to do automatically do texting and captioning of speech on Alexa. So fresh off the presses this week, so it's very exciting to be part of that. All right, so Thomas and Kevin, let's baseline. Tell us about the technologies you use to make you successful in an environment like Prudential. What do you need as being deaf to make sure that you can interact with your coworkers as effectively as possible?
Okay, hi, I'm Thomas. So I'll start. So some of the technology that we use, that I use at work in my department, pretty much is basic email and things like that. And we also use Skype just to make sure that our meetings and our phone calls are easily read for me. We also have other captioning service. So I don't know if you can see this on the screen over here to your left. So if there's an event like this and they have something at Prudential, and like Diane will set it up for me, and if there's another event, they'll have a captionist, or we'll have a real-life interpreter like the one who's here right now. And sometimes there'll be voice-to-text technology. Like there's an app you can use called Ava. And I'll explain that a little bit later. But we have other services like that Kevin will expand upon. So I agree with a lot of Thomas's comment. Like to live in an everyday world, we have a lot of technology in our personal life and our work life. Like he was talking about email and Skype and having an interpreter and captioning. But like sometimes we also have other technology related with interpreting. There are 2 different kinds of services that I want to discuss. There's video relay services and video remote services, VRS and VRI. And those are assistive technologies. Now, so VRS is almost like a video relay. So we'll have like a video chat. So if you make a phone call for me, and the interpreter will make a phone call for me, and I'll be able to make sure that works out for my personal life. I need to make a doctor's appointment, or I need to make an actual phone call through give me 1 second. Yeah. So I don't have to pay for that. That service myself is to the federal government, and it's to make sure that I can make private phone calls in my everyday life. Now, the other one I want to discuss is Video Remote Interpreter, or VRI. Now, that's a device that I can use anytime. So if I'm at a meeting with my team, I can put it up there. So it's like a video chat. The interpreter will be there, and they'll be able to voice for me, and we'll hear what is going on in the meeting and be able to produce that on the screen. So that's a really nice technology, and that's been very beneficial. So as for voice technology, I don't use anything. I don't use voice technology at my work, nor do I use it in my personal life. But I want to be careful about the message I send here today to say that a deaf person doesn't want to use it, but that I don't support voice technology. But I do. I want to see that develop for my friends and for my family and for people who have unique challenges in their life, and I want to see it benefit them. And I want to. I hope things will grow and develop as they go forward. One thing I want to discuss about as a deaf person and deaf people in the world is, how technology influences us in our life, and I think that's fine. But I really worry about the future, how technology may grow and become more mandatory in the work environment. So I'm hoping that deaf people can find out a way to find their own voice and partner with voice companies to be able to use that in our work and our personal life, so that that everyone can be that's not, we want to make sure it's not a one size fit. We want to make sure that everyone understands it's not a one size fits all technology.
So Diane, Kevin brought up a couple points. I'm going to switch over and get your perspective. I mean, I was very interested to hear him say, I fear that the message I'm sending in people leveraging voice technology or trying to incorporate technologies for us at the sacrifice of moving forward other technologies. So how do you hear the needs of the workplace and make sure that it's, that we keep it up at the speed of business, that people aren't slowing down to make sure that they have to fit in a certain technology. At the same time, they're incorporating technology as fast as possible. How do you hear the needs of Kevin and Thomas and bring that into an enterprise environment and make sure we're working symbiotically on it?
Well, I think it's as if, we're all equal. And first of all, we feel as if at Prudential, the only way that we can get the best talent, the brightest and the best, is to look at the entire workforce and what's out there, what we can sort of, what's the word I'm looking for, what our baseline is. And the entire workforce consists of all diversity, which includes people that are differently abled. And I think that, I'll have to say, I think people who are differently abled have been overlooked as far as where we mine our employees from. That's the word I want, mine, where we get our employees and source them from. So having said that, when we bring employees in that are of all abilities, we need to look at them equally. So to answer your question, developing technology readily and expeditiously for Thomas and Kevin should be no different than finding you whatever technology you need to do your business. So, it's an equal playing field in that sense. No one gets special treatment, but they all get the right treatment, and they all get treatment as quickly and as efficiently as possible. So what we've spent a lot of time on in my role is to make sure that when someone comes into Prudential, into the workforce, regardless of what their ability is, that they have the tools and technologies they need to perform at high levels and be successful. And what we found early on is that we had to do a lot of research around what are the tools and technologies that we need to help individuals who perhaps are deaf or blind or have other different abilities to do their roles. And we have been we're very pleased of the fact that we've been able to build a lot of these technologies into our infrastructure. So if you need some of the technologies that Thomas and Kevin talked about, it's right on our IT procurement catalog, right next to everything else that you would need from an IT perspective at Prudential to get your work done.
So let's go back. You guys it's great. There's a lot of content here, so I'm glad to move off the questions we had planned and just kind of dive into building off what you said. For the three of you, where does voice fit in all this? You talked about the technology you're using. You talked about how we make the tools. If we look at the spectrum of tooling and tooling for adaptive needs, where are we in the terms of adopting a voice technology, and where do we need to get?
Well, I think from my perspective, we're not, for me, it's not about voice technology, quite frankly. It's more about technology that will help us to hear Thomas and Kevin's voice. Because they have a voice, it's just that they don't communicate in the same way for us to hear that voice that some of the rest of us do.
Excellent.
I think there's ways that we can take some of the voice technology that we're working on today, and I'm not the person to do that, that's all of you. For an example, Alexa, the panel that was up here just before us, I heard them speaking about Alexa. Well, Alexa doesn't do Thomas or Kevin any good right now, as far as I know, because they don't hear her voice and they don't speak back to her, which is the way most of us communicate with Alexa. So we need to be able to integrate those technologies so that Alexa does produce American Sign Language or captioning. And those are the ways that we can hear their voice and get their ideas, because that's the only way companies like Prudential is going to be successful, is to hear what their ideas, their creativity, their innovative solutions are for us.
Yeah, so these two articles that I showed earlier about the announcements from Amazon this week, it says Amazon's Echo Show makes Alexa more accessible to the deaf and speech impaired. Live today, in preparation for this panel, Amazon's new Tap to Alexa feature lets hearing and speech impaired users trigger common Alexa tricks with a few taps on the screen. Second one is this clever app lets Amazon Alexa read sign language, and it's developed by the developer who worked on Super Mario Brothers for Nintendo, which the Nintendo Wii can read signs. So Thomas and Kevin, how can these work? How can we make them work? What would you like to see happen? And maybe you can talk about some of your experiences maybe outside of the workplace where if you've leveraged voice technology, maybe not for your own voice, but to communicate with those with a voice. What are you seeing and what do you think is possible?
Sure. So one, I think it's a wonderful technology. Alexa has this ability to capture the sign. So if a person is using TensorFlow, and it's able to capture that from the computer, from the webcam, I can sign it and it'll be able to learn what I'm doing. And then they developed an app that would link with Alexa and allows Alexa, would say, Alexa, and it would voice that so that the person at the computer can sign what they are trying to do. The computer would translate it into text and voice it for the person. Alexa would then take in that voice information, and Alexa would understand the voice command. And it would then answer, and it would become text on the computer screen. So I can read what Alexa is saying, I can sign it, and there would be the process. And I think that it's a possibility in the future to get rid of that middleman so that I can be able to sign directly to Alexa. And then if maybe I'm out and about, I can have it on a watch or a hand or something, or my phone, and be able to go in and set it up. And like if I need to buy tickets or if I need to do anything else in my life, like buy food at a restaurant, I can really cut out the middleman and be able to have this with me at all times. Now the problem with that is, the problem with the signing is that the signing library is very limited. So there are many different technologies, many different apps that teach sign, and there's texting, like they have avatars that'll sign, and many different technologies, APIs, and other things that are available, but they need to come into one central place so that is able to be applied to everybody.
Yeah, but please, go ahead.
Yeah, and this is so key because what happens is we have Thomas and Kevin working at Pru, and there are a few people at Prudential who know American Sign Language, but for the most part, over 20,000 employees here in domestic US, not that many know American Sign Language. So how do we get to a point where we know about these apps, and that's why it's so important to have more individuals that are differently abled like Thomas and Kevin in the workplace so that we learn more, we share ideas, because that's what we learn from diversity, is that by sharing our differences, we grow and learn and develop further. We advance as a society. So by having them with us, we learn more about these apps, they share them, and others like them share them, and then pretty soon maybe we'll all know American Sign Language, and there won't be this unequal playing field where we have to go out of our way to accommodate or communicate with our differently abled employees.
Kevin, I'd like to, if you could add to that, where do you see technology being used for what you need that you might think apply to everyone else, to those who aren't hearing impaired, to those who might be able to leverage it in their workplace? I mean, Thomas gives us an example of being able to eliminate the middleman. We all are looking to get employee engagement, consumer engagement, to skip that step. I'm sure there's some things that you guys see that we might be missing that could be leveraged. Do you have any ideas on that? And I mean, if you want to speak up to that as well, please do.
So I agree with Thomas and what he said about trying to eliminate the middleman, because with all technology, that's something I definitely agree with. It's a benefit for deaf people in general and for the whole population of many people with many different backgrounds, and it really helps people really be able to express themselves in their own language rather than in English, which is not our native language. So if deaf person's looking for the weather, and they type in the weather, what's the weather for today? And some people, deaf people may not have the English proficiency for knowing that basic question. So being able to ask what the weather is in their own native language of American Sign Language, it would allow them, that population of people, to be able to assign to Alexa or be able to sign instead of using typing or writing, and it really is empowering to them to be able to enter to any new situation and become more comfortable with their signs and use it more than English. And I think it's really, that's what we can do going forward.
You know, it's fascinating to think of that, though, that, you know, what can we learn in this space that might drive innovation in others, and that's often the definition of innovation. So, I mean, Diane, do you see the barriers being pushed in terms of if you can communicate, you know, with someone, between two deaf employees or a deaf employee and someone who's not hearing impaired, what does that do for our international communications? What does it do to enable us to talk to our employees in Japan or South America? Where are you seeing the parallels, maybe in terms of in enterprise, where we might be able to, you know, do some plug and play or be able to correlate those lessons from enablement, and you said, so that we don't ever need enablement again, we just make it technology.
Yeah, I think what it does is it makes us more comfortable with communicating with diverse populations. So you mentioned Japan or some of our international locations where, and one of the things that we like to do in our workplaces is, you know, do sort of awareness education and speak to individuals, speak to our employees about, you know, how people are different, and we're all different. And so I think from that perspective, from a technology perspective, I think it's just going to, you know, it'll push the researchers and the IT professionals harder. The more that we'll know, the more they'll get ideas on how they can expand it and how they grow it. But from a social perspective, from a cultural perspective, I think it'll make us more open to dealing with others that are different and diverse, because we all are. We're all unique, and we all bring something special. And what we need to do is develop technologies that can help us share that specialness, I think, you know.
So I do have a couple more questions for you, but we have about 8 minutes left. Are there any questions from the audience? I'm not quite sure where the mic went, but if you know, we'll be able to capture it. If anyone has it, just raise your hand and feel free to speak up. But I have a couple more questions, but let me ask you each of the three so we don't run out of time. We're at a voice summit. What's your ask of this group of people, this group of technologies at this time with these companies, this sponsorship? What's the call to action? What is it you want people to understand and take away from today and know that they can do and make the difference that it empowers us all? So I'll start with Kevin, if you want to, you know, you mentioned the message earlier. If you want to repeat that, that'd be fine.
Sure. So, like, I'm not a real deep technological person, so I just want to make it clear that many people who work in the voice technology, like, just to be mindful that there are a lot of people out there who use very different types of technology, and it may be, you know, there's no hard and fast rules for to make sure that everyone is included. But I want to make sure that there are as many options as possible, and if they want to give them one thing, you know, if you want to make one glove fit all hands, that may not be possible, but just be mindful of that when you're developing this kind of technology. You have to ask yourself, you know, can everyone really benefit from this? Because will it be a barrier? Will it be able to solve a barrier? You know, I really want to ask deaf people a lot of, there are a lot of advocacy organizations that would be able to really help and test the technology, because
we want to get as many.
We want to get as many partners in this as possible.
Thomas?
Perfect. And I also want you to have this idea in the sense of the apps and technology, and that this very individual basics. I want you to understand how we can all use we can all use everyone's experience to apply to make sure that these individual experiences help the whole, and I want to make sure it's beneficial.
Yeah,
Sorry.
they captured it, and I'll pull out two key words.
Great.
One is mindful, and the other is think of the individual. And so to me, what I would have said had, you started with me is that we should all be more inclusive in the way that we think about our technology. And so those words are important to me because we have to be mindful of how each individual is capable of sharing so that we can all hear everyone's individual voice.
That's excellent, Diane. It's really, you really hit on it, so I appreciate the summary there. Were there any questions? I didn't see any. I don't know if there's any hands, if anyone had anything they want to get.
There's the Sam.
I'll repeat the question. Oh, go ahead, he's got a mic. Just a second.
So as a developer, we have a lot of APIs that help us, let me rephrase, I can't write an app that can understand sign language. Is there an API that I can consume, sort of like the Google Translate app, where I can give it a sentence in English and it can translate for me into whatever language? Can we get to sign language using some sort of third-party system?
I mean, Thomas, you've done the most research in the area, so I guess you're best.
Yeah, sure. Yes, there are many different, there's an app called, what's the name of the app? Sign School, that you can spell any word you want, and it will pop up with the sign. There's another app called Mimics. And any word you put in there, any word you want, you can type it down, and it will have an avatar pop up on the screen and sign it for you. So they have that in the library, and that's maybe something you want to take a look at.
Yeah, interesting enough, I was in Ireland last week for work and met with a friend who worked at another large bank, and I told him that we were doing this panel this week, and I said, it would be great if we had these technologies. Like, they're actually out there, and he Googled it, and you'd be surprised at how many are right before you. And so I think it goes back to, Diane, if you just think of the individual and you think of ability and you take that next step, you'd be surprised what's out there. So the Mimics app is one that Thomas and I tested on Friday night, and it works. But if you just Googled, avatars for sign language APIs, you'll see a couple tools come back. I can't speak to which one is better or worse, but there are things out there. It's just if you're not, we have to challenge ourselves to think of going out and seeking them and then bringing them back in. So that's our job and what we're really responsible for doing going forward is taking some of these technologies put together. So another question for the three of you. Kevin and Thomas, you guys come from real premier institutions. Kevin from Gallaudet University, Thomas, Rochester Institute of Technology, and Diane, you've just spent, recently you were at a conference for ADAPT. I don't think it was on technology, it was really just
it was about inclusion of people that are differently abled.
Right. So, what are you guys seeing out there that you can bring forward that you might not have mentioned so far? What's the future hold for us? What can we aspire to see that's going to be in the App Store or available readily? Or what are you seeing from the talented individuals in the schools you came from?
I don't know if the guys have anything.
I don't know if you wanted to start.
I could go ahead. What I saw at the conference was actually a lot of the firms, and I'm not allowed, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but it was Google, Apple, and Microsoft presented together because they're working together on technologies for individuals who are differently abled. And all three of those companies are very, very focused on this. And so what we saw, in addition to some of the technologies that we already know about, some of the technologies that Thomas and Kevin use on an everyday basis in business, we also saw tools for life. And that was really interesting. Cameras that take pictures by speaking to them, or in other ways, we saw voice coming back that was driven by eye movements. Spoons and forks that were stabilizers, so that if you have, you're differently abled and it's hard for you to stabilize your upper extremities, these tools would stabilize themselves and help you be able to eat or just, do everyday motions. So there are people out there working on this. I think we need to do more around what if you don't have a voice, because I think a lot of it is driven on voice right now. And I think we all, as Kevin said very well, we need to be mindful about that and how we can drive things in other ways. Perhaps with eye movements, we can drive American Sign Language. You know, I don't know, but that's what I think we need to do.
Well, thanks. I mean, we're just about out of time, so let me just wrap up with a couple thoughts. First of all, thank you all for being here. It's important that you participate and you engage. I think one of the first steps to being mindful and being aware of the awareness is to break those barriers, make the effort yourself to get engaged and find out what those around you who might be differently able than yourself might need and how you can contribute to that. I think it's very exciting what you said is it's all coming, it's here, it's now, technology is an enabler, and that's a really key message. What if you don't have a voice? Just keep that in your mind, think about it, and let's bring that stuff forward as quickly as possible. Let's all be a part of it, be excited to find and discover new ways that are going to help everybody, not those with specific needs, but those with all needs, and increase our engagement with customers, with employees, with society and friends. So thank you all, and thank you for our panelists today. Appreciate it.
Outstanding.